The following is part 3 of a 5-part deep dive into the end-to-end history of the Forgotten Realms, from the first cosmic spark to modern-day Faerun. If you missed parts 1 or 2, there are links pinned in the comments and above you right about now. The first Divine Wars have subsided, the first empires have seen their rise and fall, and the unity of dragonkind has been forever fractured. The world stage is now set for its first flowering. Power breeds pride, and pride sows the seeds of ruin. This Elven proverb is most fitting for one of the most expansive eras in the realm's lore timeline that spanned the 12,000 years that followed in the wake of those ancient draconic and giant conflicts. Having begun their migration to Toril from the realm of the Feywild, or Plane of the Fairy if you prefer, circa negative 27,000 Dale Reckoning, the Elven people would assert their presence in this period, that history would call the First Flowering. Marked by the ascendancy of their variant races, this age saw the Elves of Faerun establish unparalleled cultural, magical, and political dominance, founding many notable and influential realms such as Eravandar, Illifarn, Keltomir, Myaratar, and Shantel Othrair, among others. Along with the rise of Elven nations, this era would also be noteworthy for first recording the departure of the Avariel, winged elves from eras past who, technically speaking, were the first Elven blood to call Toril home. The lore suggests the Avariel retreated back to the Feywild as their land-dwelling cousins soon became a dominant cultural force. However, the most significant pages of Elven chronicles marked by the First Flowering would be found in the divine conjuration of Evermeet. In response to prophecies and threats, along with a desire to create an untouchable homeland, Elven mages enacted a mighty ritual of high magic in negative 17,600. Their goal? To bring forth the Elven island paradise of Evermeet, a sanctuary for their people. While the ritual did succeed, the arcane backlash upon the realms was devastating, further fracturing continents and sinking vast landmasses. It should be noted here that this first Elven sundering, as an historical label and not the event itself, has at times been conflated with the prehistoric splitting of Abir Torel that I have previously covered. So if you have ever found yourself asking, hey, wasn't there a first sundering back when Ao divided the world at the end of the Dawn War? Well, take solace in knowing you're not alone. As a 4th edition lore construct, its connections are fraught with many leaps in logic. From an in-universe perspective, we can just chalk this up to Elven historians never missing an opportunity to write their names into history, a classic bit of Elven self-importance. Nonetheless, as the Elven kingdoms flourished, another race also began its own slow, steady, subterranean rise. The chronicles covering the dwarves' first appearance upon the realms is often contradictory. We have lore that posits dwarves being enslaved by the giants of Astoria as far back as negative 25,000. Yet other canonical timelines state that the earliest dwarven settlements appear much later, said to have migrated from the Yahimel Mountains of Kara-Tur bordering both Faerun and Zakara around negative 16,000. One potential path of reconciling this conflicting ancestry is to position these earlier proto-dwarves in much the same way we might classify the Avariel elves, establishing their earliest lineage by tracing the dwarven bloodline to those ancient eras. While I think it's safe to say that dwarves were indeed enslaved by the giants in that distant past, the rise of widely recognized dwarven cultures and kingdoms would not stake its claim upon the realm's landscape until circa negative 15,000, well after the colossal kingdom's fall. The details are admittedly as muddled as a tavern brawl over the last flagon of ale, but the core truth is simple and dwarvenly stubborn. The stout folk were here. They endured much hardship, a common theme of dwarven kind, just ask the Duergar. And from the Yahimel Mountains, they would migrate west to carve out the first of their great empires. In the south, the Gold Dwarves would establish the glorious underground rift city of Beherenden, beneath what modern geographies and maps call the Shar. However, its story is one of despair, ending in a prolonged siege and eventual conquest by the Drow, occurring around negative 9,000 to become the infamous first Drow capital of Talantawar. This single event cementing the eternal, bitter hatred between dwarves and Drow that exists to this very day. The First Flowering was an era of elven growth and dwarven awakenings. However, in time, rivalries grew between the disparate elven tribes and their realms, setting the stage for future discord. These early skirmishes and divisions, particularly over territory and ideology, would foreshadow the coming Crown Wars. Realms lore history offers more often than not a common trend among the fairy folk, that any age finding elven dominance inevitably also ends in an age highlighted by elven hubris. And so the golden blossoms of the First Flowering, an expansive age of elven prosperity, soon withered into the poisonous ivy that was the Crown Wars, a series of 5 brutal periods of elven conflict over a span of 3 millennia, each spilling elven blood, each marked by pride and arrogance, and each leaving a forever stain on the elven bloodline. But to understand the poison that would consume the elven people, we must first look back to distant epochs, long before the elven crowns of their growing empires were ever forged upon Toril, a time when a first elven betrayal occurred, not upon the mortal lands, but in the heavens themselves, circa -30,000 Dale reckoning. Her name was Araushni, goddess of destiny, spinner of elven fates, and consort to the elven high god Corellon Lorethian, and her treason was one of escalating depravity. First, she conspired with the orc god Grumpsh, enchanting Corellon's sword scabbard to make his blade shatter in battle. The plot was foiled only by the vigilance of the elven goddess of night skies and moonlight, Sihanine Moonbow. Undeterred, the sinister-hearted Araushni then goaded Malar, the Beast Lord, into his own assassination attempt, attacking the wounded Corellon upon his return to the elven divine homeland of Arvindor, a second failed attempt. Her third and final betrayal was a complex web of deceit. Araushni gathered a deliberately weak coalition of evil gods to launch a doomed assault on Arvindor, a war designed only to provide cover. Araushni's true plan was to make her innocent daughter, the good-aligned goddess of dance and the hunt, Ilastraii, the unwitting instrument of murder. Mother of the Year, am I right? After imprisoning the suspicious Sihanine Moonbow under the watch of her complicit son Veyron, Araushni ensured that Ilastraii would innocently deliver yet another cursed scabbard to her father Corellon. As planned during the chaos of battle, just as the paper army would break and retreat, the scabbard's magic drew Ilastraii's own arrows directly to her father's chest, nearly killing him. Araushni then moved in for her final tearful act, professing her Oscar-worthy grief and offering Corellon a god-killing poison disguised as a loving sip of healing water. But Sihanine, having slipped the watch of Veyron, arrived to perform a deus ex machina, merging with 2 other goddesses, Erdri Fania and Hanali Selenil, to form the triune deity Angharad, their combined power saving Corellon at just the last moment. For her unpardonable crimes, Corellon's judgment was swift. He stripped Araushni of elven divinity and cast her into the abyss. There she was reborn as Lolth, the demon queen of spiders, and for millennia she would wait, her hatred unchecked. And it would be in the Crown Wars conflicts 18 millennia later that Lolth would find the perfect kindling for the Spider Queen's long-simmering revenge against her elven kin. We flash forward to -12,000 DR to see these conflicts first ignited when the Sun Elf rulers of Aravandar, later called the Vaishantar Empire, launched a surprise attack on the realm of Myaratar. This Aravandar aggression would culminate in -10,500 as a tragedy that history would label the Dark Disaster and the Killing Storms. In a sinister act of elven high magic and atrocity, the Sun Elves would not only annihilate Myaratar, but taint its lush forest lands into the barren, monster-haunted wastelands, now known as the High Moor. Horrified by what can only be viewed as a genocide, the other elven nations initially united against Aravandar, yet the wars would rage on, growing ever darker. However, it would be during the Fourth Crown War where the landscape of elven heritage would be changed forever. While the destruction of Myaratar stands as a tragic monument to Sun Elf arrogance, it would be the southern Dark Elves of Ilithir who would seal their people's fate as Lolth's influence was revealed. What began as brutal but possibly understandable retribution against Aravandar's allies soon twisted into something more unholy, a sinister crusade. Bolstered by the fiendish power of their new Spider Queen, the Illithiri unleashed demonic magics of fire and corruption, consuming entire forests and prompting a united condemnation from all elves. These increasingly profane acts, carrying the stench of Lolth's revenge, soon became unforgivable. During the fifth and final Crown War in -10,000 DR, a united council of elven nations, backed by the divine might of the head of the Seldarine, cast down the Illithiri as a people. All of them. In a divine decree that would reverberate across elven history, Corellon cursed them. Their skin turned to obsidian black, their hair to stark white, and they were exiled from the sunlit world forever. This event, known as the Descent of the Drow, drove them into the deep caverns of the Underdark. In those darkened realms, shaped by a shared hatred and devoted to their Tanaree Spider Queen Lolth, the Drow would not only survive their exile, they would thrive, becoming one of the most enduring antagonists in all of Realms lore. After 3 millennia of betrayal, backstabbing, and oppression against their own people, the Crown Wars drew to a close with elven empires each retreating, destroyed, or exiled to the depths below. The era left elven power fractured and broken, with a legacy forever stained by the self-inflicted wounds of shame and tragedy. The resulting power void from these Crown Wars would then await the next civilization in line to try their hand at gaining dominion in these forgotten realms. And that concludes part 3 of our 5-part dive into the full history of Realms lore. Next, we will cover the most intimate of prehistoric stories as our ancestors abandoned their sticks and stones to emerge from their caves and lay claim to these forgotten realms. The Age of Humanity, coming in part 4. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, please consider taking those few seconds to like, subscribe, and enable notifications. And if you really want to champion smaller channels that provide the content you enjoy, the YouTube Hype feature is a powerful tool to do so. Finally, a sincere thank you to my patrons and channel members who make this content possible. And thank you for watching. I hope you'll join me for part 4. Until then, take care, my friends.